Thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome. Today we're talking about freelancing and the 6 things that nobody tells you about getting started. You may not know this, but today there are 53 million Americans freelancing. That is more than 1 out of every 3 workers. Now that freelancing has become such sort of a prominent and ubiquitous way to work, there's a lot of basic things that everybody knows about how to get started. Things like, I have to figure out how to do my taxes, or do I need to set up my business? Most freelancers, when they're getting started, have a sort of another set of questions that are really much more about things that come out of experience. Questions like, how do I find the clients that are right for my business? Or how do I even get my first client? We're really here today to talk about a lot of those questions that people are trying to piece together as they get their start in freelancing. To answer some of those questions, we've brought together our panel of experts, a longtime member and veteran freelancer with almost 15 years of experience freelancing, Marc Scheff, as well as Dan Lavoie, our Director of Strategy at Freelancers Union. The 3 of us are going to be talking for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time to answer your questions. Before we jump in, I'll just ask you guys to quickly introduce yourselves.
I'm Marc. I am an artist. I make art. I teach art. I'm an art director for various projects, including some personal side projects around these topics. I do some fitness coaching. I'm a father. I'm a husband. But the umbrella, the thing that I am, is an artist, and I freelance.
Great.
Great. And I'm Dan Lavoie. I'm the Director of Strategy at Freelancers Union. I've been working for Freelancers Union for about 3.5 years. But before that, I had been a newspaper reporter for a really long time and actually done a lot of freelance newspaper reporting and writing. So have been in and around freelancers for a long time.
And I'm Caitlin Pierce. I've been at Freelancers Union for almost 5 years, and I'll be moderating today's session. So let's just get started. I think a lot of people, when they get started freelancing, they can feel a little bit overwhelmed and sometimes just feel sort of like, what the hell am I doing? So let's start there. What the hell am I doing?
Well, I think that as long as you're doing work that's not on a W-2, you're freelancing. That's it. If you're doing stuff, even if it's stuff for your parents or your friends, or I used to build websites doing stuff for other people, you're freelancing. So that's when you start to look into some of these questions, some of the stuff that you mentioned, and also getting familiar with some of the the sort of dirty underbelly of doing this stuff, the stuff that's hard or scary. But really, as soon as you start doing work that's not for someone that's going to send you a W-2 at the end of the year, and you sort of plug it in and you're done, this is what you're doing. It took actually someone else calling this out for me to get it. I had done a mural at this this event, and somebody said, "Oh, so what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to be an artist." And he kind of looked at it and said, "Well, you are an artist, right?" And that's when it kind of clicked for me. I was like, "Yeah, I am doing this stuff." So you got to kind of own it, and then it's easier actually to start to take on some of these other questions.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that we hear our members talk an awful lot about is how they want to freelance so that they can, really do a thing that they love. And it's about trying to figure out, what is your authentic self? What is the thing that you really, really want to do? And how do you build a career that lets you get there? And the fact of the matter is, and I think Marc will talk a lot about this throughout the rest of the time, but it's not necessarily going to start right at the beginning. You're not going to have the perfect freelance career right out of the gate. It's not going to happen. So what you need to do is figure out, what is the goal that you're trying to get to, and how do you make sure that you always have that goal in mind. And again, you don't even really have to have the perfect goal. The goal might change slightly over time, but where do you really want to get to? What is it that really drives you? If you were to have a truly successful, what does success look like? And always have that image in your head. And along the way, there's going to be steps, there's going to be missteps, there's going to be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back at different times. But that's going to be okay, as long as you have a sense of really where you're going to, and also an understanding that it takes work, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take the ability to really focus and to be ready for all kinds of different scenarios as they come up. But the idea is, who is your authentic self, and make sure you're building your freelance career towards that.
And how did you know, Mark, what your vision of success was going to look like?
Oh, I mean, that's a constantly evolving question. One thing I was going to say is that, and something that I think people don't realize, it's easy to think about this in the art world, but I think this is true no matter what kind of freelancing you're doing, is to figure that authentic question out, is to actually go out and really look at the industry and see what people are doing. Not just, who's hiring, but look at some of your heroes. For me, it's, all these different artists, and to go out and look. It took me, I'm embarrassed to say, almost like 4 years after graduating art school to go out and meet some of the people who are doing this stuff for a living. And it was then that I said, oh, they are making art and they're selling it. This is crazy. One thing that I recommend is to go and do some research and, make a list of your dream clients, make a list of your heroes. What are they doing? Who are they hiring? And then you can look and say, well, Time Magazine is, hiring this kind of artist. Is that me or is that not me? Look at the art I'm making. Does that match up here? And then you can start to, either send them stuff or work up more samples or start to build some personal projects that will get their attention. And you might have a client that that you're not ready for yet, that you really want to work towards. I have clients, and like you said, that list constantly evolves. I have a number of dream clients that are no longer on my dream client list, and I've never worked for them. I just never got there. And by the time I sort of got far enough along, my path kind of went over here, because I'm constantly revisiting that list and meeting new people and discovering new places to do what it is that I love to do. And I mean, last year was a huge shift. We launched this online art gallery, and that's suddenly become something that's very important to me. And I don't think 2 years ago I would have said, this is what I want to do. It just became clear to me that I wanted to do something like this.
So going back to that topic of clients, how do you find your first client when you're just getting out there?
Find their address on Facebook. Go to their house. Don't actually do that. I think the way to get work, and the way that I still get work, is through friends. And this is hard, right? Because you get out of, say, art school, and all you know is the people in art school, and probably 20% of them are going to go on and be artists, but also they're all at the same level as you, and so they may or may not be able to actually help you. So you want to go out and actually meet real people who are really doing this and make friends with these people, and not in like that icky sort of like, hey, I'd like to hang out with you, which you can do too, but yeah, but to actually go out and meet people who you want to spend time with. And then you build these friendships. I mean, you think about in college or any time in your life, you look to your group of friends as a resource, and that's absolutely true as a freelancer. It's just maybe a different group of friends. I actually have really like two almost completely separate groups of friends. I have sort of all the people that I knew in college and when I was doing tech work and stuff like that. And then as I've sort of shifted over into the art world, I have this other great group of friends, and I love hanging out with these people. And there's places to do this. It's not just about Facebook stalking people and figuring out where they are, although that is actually a good way to do it. If you know that there's some event where there's going to be a lot of, in my case, art directors, you maybe want to go to that event, figure out what they look like, go introduce yourself. They're there as a professional. They know that people are going to be approaching them. For illustrators, it's actually very easy. There's the Society of Illustrators right here in New York, is a museum. And a great dining room with a really excellent lunch. But members there get to, you can go, you don't even have to be a member, you can go to their sketch nights, and there's people all over the map, like guys who've been doing this for 100 years and people who are just starting out, and it's a really great place, and it's social. You're not there to network, you're not there to sort of get a job, but you're there to meet people who you will have fun with and you will enjoy. So the Society is a great place. I love going there, and I've absolutely gotten work out of the friendships that I've made there, but that's not why I did it. And this kind of goes to this Buddhist or meditation concept of non-attachment, right? Like you go to make friends, and if something comes out of it, great, but that's not why you're doing it, because you can smell that. When someone's approaching you to sort of be your friend because they kind of want something, you can tell, and it's not real. It's not, as you said, authentic.
Yeah, and I've heard Mark, you say a really great line before, that real friends equal real work.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's really what our members have told us, consistently, is this idea that as Mark is saying, you give to get and you get to give, but the most important thing is just to help the people around you and to look to the people around you, the people who care about you. The ones who are really invested in seeing your success are the ones that know that you care about them. That's just how that's just how life works. Freelancing is not somehow separate from the regular rules of life.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that people see that you're authentically interested in them, and they're going to be authentically interested in you back. And when the founder of Freelancers Union, Sarah Horowitz, people are constantly coming up to her and saying, how do I find my network? I want to start freelancing. How do I find my network? And the thing she says that I think is really terrific is you already have a network. You just might not know it yet. Do you have roommates from college? Do you have your parents? Do you have your aunts and uncles? Do you have the family that lived next door to you when you were growing up? The boss from your first crappy job? That these are all people who, if you really are wanting to find new gigs and find clients, that's who you're going to find them from, especially at the beginning. Don't think that there's some mystical hidden network that you have to plug yourself into somehow. That this science fiction creation that everyone else has a network, and if I only had a network, I could be successful. Your network is there. Your network are the people around you who care about you, who you care about, and they're going to be the ones who maybe your aunt won't be able to hire you for a gig, but guess what? She might the company that she works at might have something that's interesting, or she might know somebody from from her bridge group that can help you out. Like you have no idea what you can plug into if you have people who care about you, looking out for you, and especially when you start, that's going to be such an important piece.
Yeah, and I think something you're touching on there too that's so important. The reason that this is true, the reason that real friends gets you real work is because you look out for your friends. There's a bond of trust that you make when you have a real friendship, a real authentic friendship with someone. And when I recommend someone for a job, I recommend them because I know they're not gonna screw me over. Basically, they're not gonna do a bad job and then make me look bad because we're friends. And the friendship is important enough that they're either gonna say, no, I don't think I'm up for that, or yes, I can do it, and you don't have to worry about me. That's what real friendships are.
So you're out there, you're kind of meeting people, you're trying to getting your first clients together. How do you know when you're really ready to make the jump?
I think that's a trick question, because there is no with exception, there isn't really a jump. My particular path, I went to school for computer science. I went to Harvard for computer science because I didn't know what else to do. And then I went and did some tech work, and then I started to notice this design stuff, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll do some design stuff at the companies that I was working at. And then I took some art classes, and then I kind of went to art school, and I was freelancing some web stuff on the side, and then I was doing some more, and you sort of have this gradual path where you're not sort of leaping off and saying, okay, I'm here, and sometimes at some point you may leave a job and say, okay, I'm fully freelance now, but there's an ebb and flow. In my own case, I've been freelance off and on since about 2001, and sometimes I was some of that time I was in school and doing tech freelance. Some of that time I was fully freelance. Some of the time I've actually gone back and taken full-time jobs. When we had our first child, and had bought a house and realized how expensive that was. My wife and I had a very serious talk, and we decided that I needed to go back and get a steady job, steady income, because the income was sort of fluctuating at the time. And so I did. But I still kept doing some of the freelance stuff on the side to keep my name out there, to keep those relationships, and then it became easier to go back.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've learned from our members, and Marc I think was hitting on, is that there's this sense that freelancing is an on-off switch, and it's really not. It's a dimmer. You can go you can go fully freelance. You can kind of juggle between a full-time job and moonlighting. You can take your full-time job down to a part-time thing, so you can take on more freelancing. There's a million different iterations that you can set up for yourself. And so there's kind of this myth, this idea that you are either freelancing or you're full-time or you're not. And that's not really how it actually plays out in life. And don't feel bad and don't feel pressured to feel like you have to make the jump as though that's a big, movie type of moment that you slam the door to your old company and you go out all on your own. That's not how real life is. So be comfortable with that. Know that throughout a successful freelance career, oftentimes people, so many of our members go from 1099 world to W-2 world and back and forth and back and forth. And that's just how that actually plays out. So this idea that you have to jump out of a plane and make your parachute on the way down is a myth that isn't fair, and it scares a lot of people into thinking that they can't do it, when in fact you can. There's just a lot of different paths to get there.
But then going back to that idea of like, okay, so it's a dimmer switch. How do you know when you're ready to be full-time freelancing? How do you know that you your expenses are covered? How do you think about that?
I think that's actually just the most important thing. I mean, is the expenses. This is the thing that causes all of us the most worry, the most anxiety, spirals of depression. This is where it gets really hard. And like I said, I've been doing it for almost 15 years, and it's still something that you have to deal with because there's no guarantees. You are making your own parachute on some level, and you're just at some point the parachute's big enough, but you're trying to maintain it. So one thing that I recommend to people is to make sure that you have some savings. If you're looking to sort of leap and quit your job, make sure that you have about a year's worth of savings so that if things don't go well, you have something to back that up. So you calculate your monthly expenses, your rent, your food, your kids, your whatever, and you figure out how much that's going to cost. And once you have about a year, you can sort of safely step off into the freelance world. And that also gives you the amount of time where, if you've hit 6 months or maybe 8 months and you really haven't gotten anything and you're not covering your expenses with your freelance, then you can maybe start to look for some steady work. I have a very good friend who has been freelancing for also a very long time, and he used to take a 3 or 4 month temp job kind of over the summer every year, which just paid him a ton of money. And then he could spend the rest of the year making whatever he wanted. So there's this idea that freelancing and especially being a freelance artist, it's very sexy. You can kind of do whatever you want. You make your own hours, work with no pants. It's this awesome thing, and you can work with no pants. That's absolutely true. But he would go and basically every year set himself up with a fund that he could work off of in case he didn't get enough work. And I actually don't think he does that job anymore because he spent that time building up a reputation and building a body of work that now all he does is his art.
Yeah, and I just want to re-emphasize that as well. One of the things that we like to do at Freelancers Union regularly is ask our members, especially the kind of the successful freelancers who have really made it, if you had the chance to go back and tell your younger self one thing that you didn't know, the number one answer over and over again is put away more money at the beginning. And it can be frustrating because you want to get on with it. But like Marc is saying, if you put enough money away at the beginning, it will actually allow you the space to figure out if this is a life for you. If you don't have that money, you're immediately, there's nothing that stresses people out more than when their finances are a little bit tight.
Absolutely.
And you need to make sure that you can comfortably try this out, and that you're not going to be freaking out, and that you're not, a month and a half in taking gigs that you don't actually want to take, but you feel like you have to because your landlord's banging on your door. So, the more you can put away at the beginning, the better you're going to actually, you're going to be in a position to succeed. Whether it works for you or not, you'll find out.
So, you never make your best decisions when you're hungry. Like, you don't go to the supermarket when you're hungry, because then it's like a carton full of Twinkies, and then you feel terrible, and you're not really feeding yourself. So if you're hungry, literally, if you're wondering how you're going to pay for food the next month, you're not going to be making your best decisions for yourself or your business.
So you figured out how to pay your expenses. You're ready to be freelancing full time. You're making money. Now what?
I think you said it. You're a business. When you are freelance, and I don't care if you're doing one job a month, outside of your full-time job. If you're doing stuff outside of a W-2, you're freelancing, and you need to do these things like figure out how to how you're going to pay your taxes, and because it's not the same as a W-2. How what your contracts are going to look like, where you're going to build up a client base, how you're doing all these things, and when you communicate with people, that's very important.
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things is Freelancers Union started 20 years ago now, and 20 years ago there really weren't a lot of resources out there for people, but where we are now, a lot of people have walked down this path already, and our founder wrote this book called The Freelancer's Bible, which has a ton of information in there That's really a lot more of the nitty-gritty stuff that you're going to need to know. Mike Montero has this terrific book called Design is a Job, right?
Yeah.
And what are those nitty-gritty things, the elements of a freelance business?
Well, you have to figure out, the sort of two main things are where are you getting work? Things like contracts, like what does your contract look like? And some of this stuff actually, when you're a freelancer, you are all of these things. You are your business department, your HR, your marketing, everything, and in addition to actually doing the work. But one thing that I think people don't realize is that there's a lot of other people out there who went to school for these other things, and you can hire them to do the work for you. And it's a very simple mathematical equation. This will take me, 20,000 hours to do my taxes. Is it worth paying someone $400 to do it for me? Absolutely. There's no question. The first year that I actually did any freelance, I did my taxes on TurboTax, and I owed like $2,500 or $4,000. It was like some astronomical sum to me, and I was like, I literally don't know how this happened. I didn't make any money. How do I owe this much money? And then I went and found this woman, and she sort of turned my taxes around in a week and got me like an $1,800 refund, and I've never looked back. It was absolutely worth the money. But this is also true with say legal stuff. I don't know if I mentioned, but the online art gallery that I started called Everyday Original. We do one piece of original art every day, and we've got like almost 50 artists now, and we have a contract with them because you have to have agreements with people, even if it's your grandmother. Like you have to have an agreement, otherwise you get you're booted out of the family. But I have contracts that I use. I'm very comfortable with legalese, legal language, lawyerese. That's actually a legal term, is lawyerese.
Lawyerese?
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
But I hired a lawyer, and we have a great team who, and it was very simple stuff. It was, it was probably a couple hours of work for them, but it would have been a long time for me, and I might not have gotten it right. And the last thing I want is to hurt those relationships that I've made with these people, because every friend, peer, every client, it's a relationship. Sometimes these relationships start as friendships. Sometimes they start as clients. Some of my very good friends are just former clients who we happen to really like each other. So contracts are very important. If for nothing else than to keep you sane and to save these relationships.
So speaking of that, sort of how do you take that idea more largely of you are your own freelance business, and how does it translate into how you work with clients?
Well, one thing I do when I get an email from a client or a potential client is I just have a very basic list of questions about what it is that they actually want. Because a lot of times somebody says, I really like what you do, like I need some stuff. You're like, well, okay, let's clarify, because as you develop, what it is that you want to do, and we talked before about this kind of constantly evolving, you want to make sure this is the right job for you, that you can do it. So you ask things, for me, I might respond and say, this is really great, I really appreciate you reaching out to me. So what is it that you want? I think it sounds like you want, one poster. What is your budget? When do you want it? Which of my, what brought you to me? What about my work do you like? Because sometimes, like you said, you're evolving. So sometimes someone comes to me and says, oh, I saw this thing on this like ancient website that I found of something you did 10 years ago, and you're like, oh, well, I don't do that anymore. But one of the great things about that is that it's another opportunity for these relationships, because what you can do, and I do this a lot, is to say, once you find out what somebody wants, maybe it's not for you, but you then kind of have the power to sort of gift this to a friend or peer who you trust. And this happens a lot in the art world. I think all of us do this, where somebody might come and say, I really want this kind of thing. I'm doing a book now for a publisher in Boston, and they went to my very good friend and my mentor and my teacher and my boss at Smart School, which is the online school that I teach at, and she said, you know what, you should talk to Marc. They looked at my work, they liked my work, and we kind of went from there. But it was that friendship and that idea that we're all kind of passing stuff around. We're trying to keep it. We don't want that client to kind of fall off the boat and then nobody gets to hang out with them. We want to make sure that they're staying within our networks, within our friendships.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things, especially right when you're starting out, like over communicate. Don't feel like you understand from that initial pitch email when they say, we want to hire you, here's the rate we're willing to pay you. That's not enough. Like, over-communicate so you get clarity up front so that, you know, to Marc's point, you actually know the project that you're working on. Because if the client and you have a different sense of what this project is, it's not going to work out great for anybody. So over-communicate at the front end, and then throughout the actual project itself, over-communicate. You know, again, especially at the beginning of your career and at the beginning of a relationship with any client. Even, you know, I'm sure Marc, you do this all the time still. You know, over-communicate at the beginning of these things so that you can get real clarity, you can understand each other, and then if it's not a gig that seems to really work for you, that's okay. You know, then everybody's going to have been on the same page about it. You're going to know about it, you know, sooner. You're not going to get into a situation where, you know, you're 90% of the way down the line and, oh, it turns out we had a completely different understanding of what was going on here. And then, you know, and just that's just basic ethics too. Just be ethical and decent to people. They're going to be ethical and decent back to you. If they're not, get rid of them anyway. You don't want to be working with them. You know, but to Marc's point that, you know, you want to keep people in your orbit and you want to keep them in your network's orbit, especially if they're decent folks. This might not be a gig that exactly works for you. Maybe it is, but you never know down the road. You know, they might be somebody that you would totally want to work with.
Absolutely, and you know, this is kind of one of the things that people don't talk about, and I'm sure I'm going to get some kind of hate mail about this, but the truth is, when you are starting out, you're going to take jobs that you don't like. You know, you're going to take jobs to get exposure, and you're going to make a ton of mistakes. Like I've done a number of jobs that I thought were a really cool idea, and kind of like right after we sign the contract, I go, oh man, this actually isn't going to do anything for me, but now, you know, now I'm committed. And I've learned from those things. You know, you're going to do jobs, you know, like I said, you're going to do stuff for free, you're going to do stuff for maybe not as much money as you want, and you're going to learn from those experiences, and you're going to start to develop this idea of what it is that you want to do, and just over time start to cull the herd a little bit, so to speak.
Important question. How do you do all this? How do you run your freelance business, figure out your taxes, follow your passion, be your authentic self, and stay sane?
I think when you move to New York, they give you glasses of beer and a therapist, right?
Yeah.
Everyone gets one.
Check.
No, but it is true, and I make light of it because that's how I deal with pain. No, but really, like, you know, this is something that as a freelancer, and I say freelance creatives, but really, like, if you're freelancing, you have to be creative on some level because you have to figure this stuff out. It's hard, and there's just there's probably a better way to phrase this, but like a lot of us have, you know, anxiety or depression, or just it's really hard. It's really emotionally taxing on us, on our partners, on our families. You know, we're doing this, and maybe we're working long hours. Sometimes it's feast and famine. Like all of these things are actually true, and it's important to find. It's really important to find ways to stay sane. Personally, I exercise. I don't go running because that's crazy. But I do, you know, I figured out a way to sort of optimize my day so that I can get my half-hour workouts in every day. I do a little meditation every day. There's actually this great, I used to live in San Francisco, and I have friends who are meditation teachers, and they've taught me about, you know, different things. And Adam, don't be mad, but what it actually took for me to develop a practice was this app. And you know, and it's going to be different for everybody. There's this app called Headspace, and it's just, you know, sort of like every day it's like, did you meditate today? And I'm like, oh shoot, you know, so I go and do it. But whatever it is for you, you know, and it's different for everybody. Some people need to move around. Some people need to sit still. Some people need to do both. And the really dark secret, or the thing that nobody wants to talk about, is that really actually like therapy is not a terrible thing. If you're really struggling, if you're really unable to sort of pick yourself off the floor and do this work, absolutely get help. You know, the other thing that I would recommend outside of all that stuff is make sure you have something just for you, a personal project. I have a number of them. You know, the one that I'm working on now is this project called Drawn and Drafted, and we're doing a book called Make Art Work about a lot of this stuff, where we're sort of putting together a book-sized cheat sheet where we're pointing to places like the Freelancers Union and Mike's book and some other places to say, you know, if you want to know more about these, you know, these are the things that you need to know, and you can go and look in these different places. But for me, that's a project that I can really sink myself into, and it's not for anybody. there's no stress, there's no pressure. It is literally just something I love to do. Because there's this myth that when you're a freelancer, you just get to do stuff that you love, but you're actually doing it for other people. And they might be hounding you, and they might be calling you at 4 a.m, which is a client that you want to get rid of. And then, it might not actually start to be that fun because it's not for you. So I think for me, really, like doing personal projects is absolutely therapy, and it's so important for everybody.
Well, and I would just add too that you're not alone. Like I think that a lot of freelancers have this sense like, oh my gosh, nobody could possibly understand me. And oftentimes in their small friend group, they might be the only one who's freelancing, and it might feel really isolating and difficult. But there's a lot of people out there like you. Marc was talking about the Society for Illustrators. There's going to be a group of people like you meeting somewhere in your town.
Absolutely.
That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Freelancers Union, we have these events in 20 cities now called Sparks, and once a month, just freelancers get together, and it's just it's just going to be people like you. We have this online forum called Hives. There's places like General Assembly where you can come and just meet other people who are kind of going through this same life journey as you, and that's going to be really important. It's not only going to be important to actually build out your network. You might end up finding gigs through these folks, but more importantly, you're just going to find a level of emotional and real support that you're going to need. Any successful freelancer knows they're only as good as their network, and your network is professional, it's personal, it's all of those things. So go and find folks like you. Get out of the house.
Get out of the house.
Get out of the house and meet real people and talk to them in real ways and do it in an authentic way that, that's always going to come back to you tenfold at some point.
Yeah, I mean, support and strategies for what's worked for others. Like that's sort of what we're doing today. So before we have tons of questions. Before we get to fielding questions, real quick, final thoughts. What are your wrap-up thoughts as we end this conversation?
I think you actually almost touched on this at the end, which is, if I were to say one thing that I want people to walk away from this is to go find or make friends or learn from someone who has done this or looks to be a little further along your path. I'm very, very lucky to have a mentor who I can call a friend. She's also, like I said, my boss, Rebecca Gay. She's a great painter, but she's kind of also done everything. She's done comic books and gallery work and books and all kinds of stuff. And she's someone who now, we're close enough that I can go to and say, how much should I charge for this thing? Does this contract look okay to you? Does this painting is it terrible? And she'll be real. I also know the thing is, and this is really key, is that you find someone who will be honest with you. Because you can go and find someone online and say, hey, what do you think of my stuff? If they don't know you, they're going to say, oh, it's nice, good job. But I have Rebecca who 9 times out of 10 will say, oh, it's good, but it could be better, and here's how. And that's how you get better. And that's how you also gain confidence. You have someone who's behind you, who's invested in your career and your work and willing to tell you the truth to get you there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say that my final thoughts are actually very similar, which is just that there are people out there who have gone down this path already. Again, 20 years ago, that wasn't really the case. But there's now, a generation or two of freelancers who have paved this path. It's still a difficult one. There's still challenges. But there are resources now that there had never been before. There are opportunities to go and meet folks who are like you and just, get out of the house, meet them, talk to them, become friends with them. And, this is your life. And these are going to be, your network is going to be an amazing mix of the professional and the personal if you're really successful. So go out there, find folks who you can learn from, find folks who you can give back to as well, and just go out and do it. Great.
Well, thanks so much, guys. And let's dive into a couple questions from the live audience. I'm going to start with this question, which I really like, from Veronica Duckett. How do you use Twitter to get freelance work?
Well, the truth is sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. For me, I think about my different social feeds, and I've tried to curate them as in very specific ways. So my Instagram, is mostly about my work. Some, a little smattering sometimes of another project, but it's mostly about my art. And then Facebook, I have a Facebook page that's just about my art. Then there's my Facebook profile, which truthfully is mostly about my art, but it can be about other things like the fitness stuff I do, and but never about what I ate for breakfast. I think that's a terrible thing. I think, and I say this in jest, but if you're actually putting yourself out there as a professional, and I had this conversation with somebody else, you got to find a way to kind of brand these different feeds. Twitter, Twitter is a way to share, in the most basic sense, it's a way to share ideas and links and to show that you are thinking about whatever it is in your industry. But it's very important to still kind of maintain that professional status. I had a friend ask me the other day, because the Drawn and Drafted project, we do some sort of artist identity consulting. And one of the things, she said, okay, so how do I do this? And we looked at her Facebook feed and said, okay, so like, you're posting about like, oh, I had a hard day, or like all this stuff, and I'm like, you kind of have to get rid of that stuff a little bit. Like, you can't be a complainer. You don't really want to post a ton of pictures of your kitten. And I know that people really want to do this, and it gets tons of likes. But it's if you're putting yourself out there as a professional, and Facebook, say, is a place that you want people to go, then you have to tailor it. There's people who do it very differently. There's people who say, my Facebook profile is literally just my friends. I don't friend anybody there. It's just for my friends. I have a page that's about my art, and then you post on your page. The key to all this stuff, I think, is to be consistent and regular. If you're going to be on one of these services, be on it well, and post consistently, and don't drop off. And just, I have a friend who he just posts a drawing a day, and he's a huge following now, but he's just been consistent, and you get rewarded. All the algorithms reward you for that stuff. Google looks for content that changes over. Facebook rewards you for that. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, and I think to just quickly add on that, I got one writing gig a few years ago from, basically my Twitter. I have to admit, I sometimes put pictures of my kids on there.
Every now and then. Because you want to look like a real person.
Yeah,
right?
you want to look like I am a real person. But, really what I use, especially Twitter for, is to have kind of conversations with reporters, with, people at think tanks, things like that I just, I just think that they're smart and they're interesting. And usually what I'm doing is sharing a link with them or saying, hey, what do you think about this thing? Through some of those relationships, I've gotten writing gigs, come back because people are like, who's this guy? Like, we kind of have like a little online friendship, and then they find out more about me, and they're like, oh, he could be somebody who could, who could do a little bit of work for me. So, and I wasn't looking for gigs with that. I actually wanted to know what these people thought about stuff. So that's why I was asking them. I wasn't expecting
that real connection.
The real connection.
Exactly. I wasn't expecting anything back, and something came back because I was trying to be like an honest and normal person, and was asking these people their real, honest opinions. And so I think for me that's one of the things that I think you can do on Twitter, especially, is get noticed by people who you think are interesting, and have like a normal a relationship with them that isn't aimed exclusively at getting a gig. It's just with Twitter you can have access to people you perhaps could never have access to in real life.
Absolutely.
So use the power of that to have like a real an authentic relationship.
And it sort of sounds like you're also saying sort of like be engaging and magnanimous too.
Yeah, get it. I mean, you kind of said this, but get in the conversation is. I think that's actually Twitter's tagline or something. But it's true. It's true everywhere. Go into Twitter and find topics that you like and follow those people and kind of look at what they're doing and talk to them. I do this on Instagram too. I've got an artist, Stephen Russell Black, who I've just been following on Instagram for a while, and when I came up with this art gallery project, he was one of the first people I thought of, just because we had this connection in a place where I think about art. And it was a real connection. Like, we weren't sort of talking to each other to get work from each other, but it came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question from Dahl. Tell us about your first clients and how you got to the point where he or she wanted to give you money for work.
My first clients. My first clients were friends. When I was in art school, I was doing tech work, and my first clients were friends who needed a website for their freelance business, or a website for their LLC, or whatever it was. And I've got a list of clients who were actually just my friends. My first art client, I still actually don't really know how I got it. I think it was through somebody else who was doing the work, and they found me, and now it sort of feels like a fluke, especially when I look at what I made for them. This is another thing. It's kind of important to look back at what you did and see how far you've come, because this can be like a really emotionally difficult career, and you have to remind yourself how far you've come every now and then. But those first clients were tech clients, and that actually got my feet wet, so that when an art client came around, I was used to talking to people and used to having those conversations. It was great to be able to practice that with friends and make mistakes. Like some of those first clients, I didn't have a contract, and got in kind of real arguments with people about it. And the ones who were actually my friends, like, we're still friends.
Well, and my first client was an old boss of mine who actually hired me to basically do the thing that I had done for her, at my old job. And I had moved on to a different thing, blah blah blah. But like, she wanted me to do some of that work. She knew that I was good at it, and she reached out to me. But also my second gig was from a woman who I had gone in for a job interview, years before, and hadn't gotten a job, it hadn't worked out. But she and I had stayed friends basically on Facebook. We would like see each other maybe once a year, but had developed like a normal kind of friendship, and it was nice. And then when she had a gig, she was like, "Oh yeah, that Dan, he's smart about this thing. Let me reach out and see if he wants to do it." Mm-hmm. So I had no idea either of those things would ever have turned into freelance gigs. It was just that they kind of knew me. They knew basically my skill set, and they knew that I was the kind of person that you could reach out to, and I would be honest if I could do it or not, and that's really where those gigs came from.
Question from MD Floyd. Can you do cold calling via email? I'm shy and introverted and shudder at the thought of cold calling in person.
Oh man, you can
empathize
see my
with that.
whole position is changing thinking about cold calling, and going up and meeting people in person. And it's funny, like now I'm kind of I've gotten to a point where people actually like do this with me, and I'm like, don't worry, please. I know exactly what you're feeling. Yes, absolutely. You can cold call over email, and one great way. Like I said, I do art direction, and it's really great when someone emails me and says, "Hey, I've been following you for a while. I love these projects that you're doing." So it shows me that they're not just sort of throwing me like a newsletter that they got my name off some list. Mm-hmm. They're saying, I actually really like what you do, and I would love to do something with you or for you or whatever. So you show them that you know a little bit about what they're up to. You give them some relevant samples, and this is also where having kind of a mentor comes in, because you can say like, well, what does samples look like if you're a web designer versus an illustrator versus whatever, and then you thank them for their time, and that's it. In most cases, you probably won't hear back if it's a cold call, and if it's email, it's probably a little bit easier. I hear from illustrators sometimes they're like, I emailed this art director 4 times last year and I didn't hear anything. And they're like, well, maybe they didn't like your work, or it's not right for them, or whatever, and they get 1,000. I have a friend who literally gets thousands of emails a day, with people who want to work for her company, and it's just impossible. So you got to develop a little bit of a thick skin. I say a lot that success is measured in how you are when you fail, because in this industry, like, that's what you're going to do most of the time, and if you just get really good at that, you're going to be successful. And one last thing about cold emailing is that you don't want to do it too much with the same person. The general rule of thumb is that like once a quarter, 4 times a year, if you've got something that's like an update. So in art terms, you have a portfolio, you've got a series of paintings, you send them a couple, you say like, here they are, not the large files. A URL is usually very good. And then you follow up in 3 months and say, hey, I just wanted to keep you up to date. I've got some new work. Don't show me the same 12 paintings because I already saw them, and it shows me that you're not doing anything. But if you have some new work, you can show that off about 4 times a year. If you email someone once a week, you're going to get blocked, period. Especially if they don't know you, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think that implicit in what you're saying too is that, I don't know if there's a formula for this, but if you're cold emailing 50 times a day, you're doing it wrong. Like, no, because you can't have an authentic interest in the people that you're cold emailing if you're just running dozens and dozens and dozens a day. Maybe pick a handful to do in a week, and show that and actually choose the people that you would really want to work with, and that it would be really good for you to get an in with, and show them that you really understand who they are, and and you're giving them a reason to reach back out to you. If you're just sending out the same form email and changing the dear, sir or madam at the top, then you're just, that's never going to come back. You need to show a real authentic interest, get them to know that you spent some time and thought in reaching out to them.
There was a great, I forget who did this, but somebody sent their portfolio, and I forget even what it was for, but they sent it they sent a tissue box, and when the person pulled out the tissues, it had all the resume items on it. I don't know if you want to do that with everybody. It made sense. It was like for Kleenex or something. But I have a friend who works at Pixar, and I was really interested in working at Pixar when I was younger and when I was out in California, I knew that he wasn't there in the office. I said, can you get my resume to this? He said, we're hiring for this kind of job. I said, I'd love to do that. Can you get me the resume? And what I did is I actually peeled a wine label bottle off a bottle of wine and put one of my images with my contact and general sort of experience kind of in the wine bottle label. So I designed this label and sent this guy a bottle of wine. I got the interview. I did not get the job because my work was not good enough. But it's that kind of thing where you can also get creative. I don't know what you do, Floyd, but like in the art world, I know people who do pick 6 to 10 people that they really want to work for and make like a special book and send it to them, and it stands out.
I'm going to toss this over to you, Dan, from Pam Elliott. Are there any Freelancers Union events in Los Angeles? And please discuss health benefits through the Freelancers Union.
Sure. So actually we have 2 monthly events in Los Angeles. One in Culver City and the other one...
Downtown LA.
In downtown LA. Thank you. And these are called Sparks. And this is actually the second month. The next one's on March 11th. You can go to freelancersunion.org/spark and get all the details and RSVP. But, really what these Sparks are is an opportunity, on the same night in cities all across the country, freelancers are getting together to talk about issues that impact freelancers. And, to not only talk about it and get, help and resources from each other, but also just to meet the other freelancers in your community. To, I don't know how many times we've said in this webinar that, your network is going to be super important. And, these Sparks are so far, people seem to really be enjoying them. So we hope that folks can go. And in terms of health benefits, we actually have at Freelancers Union a national benefits platform where anyone across the country can go online, freelancersunion.org/benefits, and put in your zip code, and you'll get access to a curated set of health insurance plans, but also liability plans, disability, retirement for freelancers, amazing. And, again, all these things that we were talking about, these are the things that when you decide to make the leap, when you decide you're really going to run your freelance career as a business, this is all stuff that you're really actually going to need. So again, you can go onto this platform, get a curated set of options for you to choose from right there. It's really easy.
And the medical center in New York is free if you have the insurance.
That's
right?
Correct. Yeah, we have 2, no copay primary care centers, one in Manhattan, one in Brooklyn. If you get insurance through us, you can go there for free.
They are capital N nice. Like I've been there, and they're really nice. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have free yoga and meditation, and
I know.
There's all kinds of. We also have great networking events and things there. So if you're in New York City, this is a really terrific option, and we hope to actually be opening a lot more of those in the next couple of years all across the country.
Indeed. One question from Pam Elliott. Do you need to create a DBA company or LLC company when freelancing?
No, is the short answer. You should definitely talk to an accountant or a tax person. But if you are doing work for someone and they pay you, you've essentially set up a sole proprietorship, which is how you sort of file it under your taxes. And like I said, I've got a tax person to handle all this for me, so the ins and outs are I don't have the precise language, but basically, yeah, if you get paid, you don't need to set something up. If you're starting to work with maybe bigger clients or taking on some bigger money, you might want to think about forming a sole proprietorship or a DBA or an LLC or a C corp. There's all these different ways of setting up your business, and you want to talk to somebody. Like I said, I've got this person, and I talk to them and I say, is now the time to switch or move up to like an LLC or something. So
how do you find a person?
Friends, absolutely. I mean, when I was looking for a tax person, I first went to my friends, especially friends who do this, and said, like, can you recommend someone? So I actually went to our lawyers and said, do you have someone that you recommend for this kind of work? Because you work in that where you probably touch that world more than I do.
Yeah, and actually, if you don't have a great friend who can do this, there's also in the book, The Freelancer's Bible, there's like a whole chapter on the benefits and the pros and cons, basically, of all of these different ways of setting up your business. There isn't really one right answer. So make sure that you go and you have somebody that you either trust or you really read into all the different options. To Mark's point, in short, when you're just starting, you don't necessarily have to do a lot of that, but there will come a time where you're going to really want to think through, like, what is the actual, tax structure of your business? And there's going to be a lot of pros and cons. There might not even be one that's exactly right for you, but you're going to have to end up choosing one.
So, last question from guru.com. What advice do the speakers have about financial planning? Tax season, smiley face.
Oh. It's the worst.
No.
And you actually mentioned the Freelancers Union has a retirement plan. I mean, there's no easy answer to this except for you should think about it. When you're thinking about going freelance, that's one thing that you should actually think about is not just do I have 12 months of expenses, but how am I going to actually save money? Because what you don't want is you don't want to end the 12 months and be completely penniless and no job. In my particular case, I'm very lucky that I'm married to someone who works, and so when we were doing our planning, we could sort of figure out how much freelancing I could do, and if I needed to have, like I said, I went back and got that design job, and then worked at a game company, and we sort of figured these things out together. But at the core of it is financial planning. It's a conversation we're having now, and honestly, it's never an easy one. It's a hard conversation because probably at some point in the conversation you realize that you're maybe not going to be able to do some stuff that you wanted to do or have the thing that you wanted to have, or maybe you are going to need to go back and get a full-time job somewhere for what your goals are. Like I said, I was lucky because she was able to at times when things were kind of thin for me, step in and cover some of our expenses, and then we have our shared expenses. But all of this takes either a conversation with your partner, ideally a financial planner, and we do have one, someone who we talk to and just try to figure out what it is that we need to be thinking about. Because, and this is it, when you're freelancing, you have to know all this stuff, but you can't be an expert in all these things. It's literally impossible. I didn't go to lawyer school. I didn't go to financial school. You can tell, because I called it financial school. But I didn't go to all these other things, but I'm doing them, and it's back to the other question too. It's like you do what you can, and then when you've been doing it for a little while, you maybe want to kind of step up and get someone else to jump in and help you, because it'll actually in the end it'll save you time, which is money.
Yeah, and we were just talking about the primary care centers that we have in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and it's all freelancers who go there, and so the doctors have learned what are the challenges or the things that freelancers face that that other people don't. And one of the things they do now in the actual regular annual physical is ask, do you have an accountant? Which basically translates to, do you have your shit together? And
are you stressed out?
And are you stressed out? And that's really the key. And so you want to make sure that you're not going to know everything. You're just not, and it's going to be, that's all right. But you really need to ask folks who do know a little bit. And to Mark's earlier point, make sure you have a dedicated account where you're putting all of your professional expenses, but oftentimes even have a third account where you're putting away just money for taxes. For every $10 you make, put $3 in that other account, because you're going to have to pay estimated taxes quarterly, which if you don't freelance, you have no idea that that's a thing that even exists. The place that I really learned to save money was video games. You play Legend of Zelda or whatever, and I know this is silly, but you go through, and at some point, they're like, do you want the axe? And you're like, I do, but I really want that bigger axe, So it's I'm gonna save. I'm gonna wait and not buy that thing, and I'm gonna wait so I can get the axe of God or whatever the thing is that you want. But it's so funny that I used to. That's really
save your coins.
Yeah, and then I do save your coins, and then absolutely. So everyone go buy Legend of Zelda. It's a great game.
Yes, okay. That's the moral of the day.
That's a good ending point. But anyways, thank you so much, Mark and Dan, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, this has been great.